Republicans dead. Where I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I wouldn't lose any voters, okay?
The women with the least likelihood of getting pregnant are the ones most worried about having abortions.
On January 6th of 2021, you had tens of thousands of people peacefully protesting.
No, it's not a right-wing conspiracy theory. It's not QAnon. It's real.
Hey, folks, it's Rick Wilson. Welcome back to the Enemies List podcast. I'm joined today by the Bulwark's Will Saletan, a very, very sharp observer of the chaos, the confusion, the ugliness, the fire, the arson, the running and the screaming that we're experiencing right now in Washington, D.C. and across the country. Hey, Will, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Hey, I'm a long-time admirer. I'm just delighted to be here.
Glad we're connected. So I want to start out and ask you where you see the central figure in this drama right now, which I would argue is not Donald Trump but Elon Musk. Where do you see this Doge arc ending in Washington? Because I feel like there are cracks forming now. I feel like members of Congress are starting to realize the scope of what's going to happen in their districts. And I wanted to get your take on Elon's sort of the chaos monkey act we've been experiencing.
Yeah. I mean, we've obviously never seen a billionaire stand next to the president in the Oval Office and play president for an entire press conference while the president sits. And we're not used to seeing Donald Trump be so passive, right? I mean, Donald Trump was always the leader. He does his rallies. Everybody sucks up to Trump. And here's Trump sitting mutely while Elon holds court for, what was it, 15, 20 minutes? I mean, pretty bizarre. So there's the longstanding debate about whether to go after Trump or Musk. Trump got elected, Musk didn't. Musk is a billionaire and all that. And so people feel like then there's the heat shield argument that Musk likes being likes drawing the fire, and that takes it off of Trump. I don't yet have enough information to make a decision on that, except that Musk obviously is vulnerable in all the ways Democrats like to attack, right? Democrats have their traditional class warfare or anti-rich argument. It's the one thing, as they've sat mutely or passively in the face of all these attacks, it's the one thing they've clung to, that we're the party of the little guy and Trump's doing all his stuff to pass tax cuts for the rich. So here's this billionaire and he's cutting stuff. And you're famous for having said everything Trump touches dies. This is not touching anymore. This is, flamethrower,
right.
Axe.
Chainsaw.
The chainsaw is a good one. Actually, Elon Musk, let's go with Musk's one, which was wood chipper, right? We're putting all the stuff in the wood chipper. I personally think, so I was thinking about this weekend because Amy Klobuchar did sort of her attempt at the Democratic message, and it was costs are up, chaos is up, and corruption is up. That's a lot, from like doing ads. You kind of got to pick something. I would pick the chaos. I personally think that I was hoping that America would care more about the corruption, the authoritarianism. I haven't seen it. But the sheer destruction that Trump is doing in his first 3 or 4 weeks is so vast. And he's doing it so indiscriminate. I mean, let's say Musk is doing it, but they're doing it together. So indiscriminate. They're going after things like the nuclear weapons security people, right? The FAA, their latest one is firing a bunch of people at the FAA. Well, we got plain. So I think that the Democratic message should be that Trump and Musk together are going around feeding stuff into the wood chipper, axing, whatever metaphor you want, destroying things. And that a lot of those things, some of those things over time, very quickly, are going to show damage where a hurricane comes in, there's a plane crash, and we just point and say, they did it.
Measles outbreak,
measles,
bird flu.
There is measles.
There's a lot,
yeah.
I do think that that chaos argument. Look, I've as an ad maker in the before times, I would have told you corruption is always the killer app, but it doesn't really seem to be that anymore because I think Trump has, in the words of Daniel Patrick Moynihan, defined deviancy down to the point where people are like, well, of course he steals money. He's rich. He must steal money. And they don't, and that's not a criticism anymore. It's just like okay. It's sort of baked in the cake. And I think you're right that the chaos is starting to weigh on people. I think that the chaos is starting to cause people to take a breath and go, okay, wait. I wanted gas and groceries to be cheaper, not Gaza and Greenland.
Right.
Which I think is, I think the chaos, we may have also ended up buying a batch of international chaos this last week. And I wanted to ask you about your take on that, because I think Hegseth, Vance, and Rubio have all catastrophically harmed the stability of NATO and the stability of the world.
Yeah. The currency of the United States as an ally is, the polite term they would say, at an all-time low. It's in the toilet. It's like, if you are, I mean, just put yourself in the shoes of anyone who has been an American ally to this point. Why would you trust the United States, A, for the next 4 years, as long as Trump's around, and B, beyond that? Because America, they gave us a pass, Rick, on the first Trump administration. Okay, that was a close call. When nobody expected Trump to win, and then he attempts a coup, and we've learned our lesson. We go back to Joe Biden. Joe Biden goes back to Europe, and they're all like, America is back. We're not going to get a pass on the second one. We knew everything. We put him back in there. He said he would do all this stuff. If I'm the Europeans, I'm doing exactly what they're doing. Let's figure out how to do a European army. There's security stuff like around NATO. There's trade stuff, Rick. You're the Canadians and the Mexicans. You've been doing everything through the United States. Why would you count on America? Every month, the president of the United States is going to review his personal opinions of whether you're cooperating on fentanyl or whatever the heck it is. And he's going to decide whether to slap you with a 25% tariff. Why would you put up with that? You're going to figure out trading paths around America. There's going to be a free trade zone that excludes us. So I think all over the world, in security and in economics, the United States is going to become as much of a pariah as any aggressive large nation state might be.
I think that's right. And I think that, our peer competitor, China, has had a very good month. With USAID, with the chaos in NATO and Europe. Vladimir Putin got the lifeline he needed, because I make the argument that there is only one life in the Ukraine war that Donald Trump cares about, and it's Vladimir Putin's. But there is this sort of sense in my mind, and as a guy who did a lot of work on NATO issues back in my misspent youth, we pissed away 75 years of credibility and goodwill in Europe. For what? I mean, I still don't understand the end game of destroying NATO, other than Trump has been convinced by someone that there's a fundamental realignment that he can brand as his own that makes America part of this authoritarian axis. And what's your take on the deeper motivation there? Or are they all just fucking Duganites now?
So my take on this is they're all following Trump. And what Trump is following is, the core of Trump is he doesn't understand anything but money. Now, he doesn't understand money either. But he thinks he understands money. He thinks he understands it, and he doesn't understand the value of anything but money. So the way Trump has always talked about Europe, for example, is that they're economic competitors. If we run a trade, he doesn't understand trade deficits. He thinks they're subsidies. But he describes the Europeans as taking all this money from us. He doesn't draw a moral distinction in his mind between our allies who trade with us and our enemies who trade with us. So his attitude towards the Europeans is they're ripping us off. It's about time we focused on them as antagonists, adversaries, whatever you want to call it. And so take Ukraine. His view of Ukraine is not, well, we need to band together and do what we all can to pitch in to stop the bad guys. His view of Ukraine is, how much money are we putting in, and how much money have the Europeans put in? And we put in all this money, and he doesn't even count all the stuff they do to house people who fled Ukraine. That kind of
yeah, it's enormous. So as we look at a reformatted NATO, which is going to essentially become the European treaty organization in my view,
yep.
Plus Canada maybe. So the world realigns. I think Zelensky this weekend was very, very direct about it. If you do this, if you sell us down the river, Putin will be in Western Europe pretty soon. And I talked to some people this weekend. I talked to somebody who's very smart about German foreign and defense policy, a longtime friend of mine, who said, well, first off, she said, Vance's speech must have sounded great when they wrote it in Moscow, because it really was like every like Russian agitprop trope about America, and Europe. But I think the outcome of this. I mean, I hated saying this, but I think it's going to drive more countries to develop nuclear weapons.
Absolutely.
What is the one surety that Ukraine could have stopped this with? And folks, if you don't think that Germany could whip up a nuke in about a couple of months, think again. Or Sweden, or any other technologically sophisticated country, and France and the UK have 500 or so warheads between them. There are outcomes here. I think we just emboldened the worst aspects of this. And I keep trying to find, again, to go back to that question, I keep trying to find like the underpinning, because it's not just Trump now. I mean, Vance is making a more, I use this word advisedly, sophisticated argument than Trump does. Rubio is, he's following along. He's a lapdog now. But there are a lot of people in the MAGA movement who really look at Europe as the enemy and Putin as the ally. Are they trying in some clumsy way to realign us completely? Or is it just, the chaos of Trump and the craziness of Trump and the opportunity of some of these people to try to ride in on that?
Yeah, I don't think they're trying to realign us, because to me, Rick, and you can tell me if you disagree with this, to me, the core idea is, so one was we only care about money. The other is the isolationism. So it's about turning inward, not about we're going to build an alliance with some other country with even, the Axis powers, or in this case, China, Russia, that kind of thing. I think it's about turning inward, and it is a replay with the parties reversed of all the debates that we had, 20, 30, 40 years ago. And you're all, all about this. But it was the Republicans who said things like, no, we mustn't abandon Europe. We mustn't turn inward. If we do, here are all the prices of isolationism. And we're seeing them now, right? So the decision for everybody to get their own nukes, because we don't want to, we're going to focus on our own stuff. Everybody figures out, dad's not paying attention to us anymore. So we're going to go out and party or whatever. My metaphor is falling apart here, but it must be very strange, because I grew up, as a kind of sort of a center left person, but as a Republican from the Reagan era, you're watching all this stuff unfold that is the mirror image of the debates on foreign policy of the past. And just let's go back to Hegseth for a minute. So Hegseth goes over there and he says, so first of all, the Republicans are out there bragging that they've gotten Putin to negotiate about Ukraine. This was a thing liberals used to do, where hey, we got some talks going. We have, and the Republicans were the ones who said talks aren't useful. This is a bad guy. He's going to take what he can.
Right, he's going to roll you.
Absolutely, he's going to roll you. Right. Not only that, not only is it a triumph that we got Putin into these talks, which we haven't even done that yet, but Vance goes over there and he says up front before the talks begin, right? He says Ukraine's not getting back its territory, and he says we're not going to let them get into NATO.
Right.
And that's the Tulsi Gabbard line too, where we mustn't antagonize so they're making these concessions up front. And Rick, if a Democratic senator did that 30 years ago, you'd be all up at the phrases, you'd be all over him.
I'm telling you, well, the ads would be, Senator Smith wants to betray America, American interests, and sell out to the Soviet Union. I mean, these ads write themselves in that era. And honestly, in some ways they do today. But I think that isolationism gene is one that is, it's really colliding with an amazing set of realities. It's like, I don't know how the MAGA guys on the one hand say, we're going to get out of Europe and we're going to not be involved in these foreign entanglements. We're going to stay out of the fight in Europe. It's just about between Putin and Ukraine, but also simultaneously saying we're going to have American troops rebuilding Gaza. We're going to invade Canada, and we're going to take over Greenland, and we're going to take over Panama, which I can tell you, we've had bad experiences in shall we say, Muslim desert environments for the last 30 or so years. We've had bad experiences in jungle environments in the last 100 or 50 years. We haven't really had a real Arctic war in a while, but we may be about to find out how that goes for us, because it's like, I don't. How do you think that the MAGA people hold all those things? How do you think they wrestle that cognitive dissonance of we're not going to be involved in foreign wars, but we're going to expand the American empire?
It's so weird, Rick, because when you ask a question about what the MAGA people believe, it's almost a contradiction in terms, right? They believe whatever Trump does, kind of in a way. I mean, they have some core things about the nativism, but they follow whatever Trump does, and what Trump seems to have some idea about going back to the McKinley era. So we're gonna have like the McKinley tariffs. We're gonna have the expansionism of the United States. But actually, what you're saying now, I want to go back. Let's loop this back to what you were saying about an alliance with Putin. So there isn't an official alliance with Putin, and America doesn't want to commit to that. But there could be a de facto alliance, and the de facto alliance would be spheres of influence, right? It would be Biden and the Europeans said, we're going to, defend Ukraine. We're going to try to prevent the invasion of Taiwan. Trump might come along and say, you know what, my interest is in expanding the American domination of our hemisphere. So Panama, Greenland, try to coerce Canada into becoming a state. The tariffs on the Mexicans and the Canadians. So he's trying to claim dominion over parts of our hemisphere, over parts of our continent that we didn't. And you could see logically how this might lead to or coincide with him saying, you know what, if the Russians feel like for their security, they need to have part of Ukraine or all of Ukraine, or maybe other parts of the Baltics. If the Chinese feel they need Taiwan, if they need the South China Sea, they need a few extra islands or whatever, they'll do their business and we'll do our business. I could see that kind of alliance for him.
Yeah, I mean, the sort of the axis of assholes idea here of he says, and there's a big segment of the broligarchy types who are like, well, it would increase efficiency for our supply chain for China to absorb Taiwan, and anybody who thinks that Taiwan is letting China get TMSC and all the chip fabs over there, you got another thing coming, folks. So switching over to domestic politics a little bit, Will, we are starting to see some of the impacts in red states and some of the Doge wood chipper working overtime somewhat indiscriminately. And we're starting to see some of these hits in red states. I had a Republican political operative out of Alabama who I hadn't talked to for, almost 10 years, used to be friendly with, reached out last night after I posted something about it and said, yeah, it is kind of strange how bad we're going to get screwed here because Elon hates the old NASA and everything else. And Huntsville is about to lose 20,000 jobs. And I'm like, listen, this is what you wanted. You voted for. So that as that sort of thing scales up and out, because we are seeing it in a lot of red states, how long do you think it can go on with this sort of indiscriminate level of burn it all down and we'll figure it out later?
So I made a little list here while you're talking. I'm trying to think about this is going to be disastrous. And the question is at what speed and in what order, right? And ideally what you want, the classic bad scenario is like a climate change scenario where the consequences take decades after the damage is done. What you want is for the damage to register quickly. And I'm sorry. Let's start off with a classic stipulation. I hope Donald Trump succeeds as a wonderful president and America does blah, blah, blah. Okay, but the reality is...
but knowing what we know...
since everything's going into the wood chipper, what's going to cause damage first and how do we get... Because we need to turn public opinion against him. And certainly the stock market would be quite useful. That's the thing he pays attention to. Number one on my list was tariffs, because that can quickly drive up prices, and then people say, "What the hell? That's the reason why we put you in here." You're talking about the job losses, federal job losses. Maybe that registers. I feel like that'll take some time, and it's going to be a little bit contained. The nuclear, taking down the nuclear weapons supervisors. I have FEMA down here. And then at the bottom here, my original two, FAA and CDC. Measles, bird flu. Bird flu is obviously spreading among animals, getting into different species. How long before it gets into us? Of course, RFK Jr. famously said, "We're going to give infectious diseases a break for 8 years."
He is going to kill so many people. Yeah, and I think some of the program stuff, like, slashing USAID sounds great on paper, but you've got farmers across the Midwest and the Deep South, notoriously not blue areas these days, who are like, I can't sell my grain now. I have there are billions of contracts for American farmers to provide food overseas. It gets slapped in those white bags and with the USAID logo on them and shipped to trouble spots around the world. And I don't think that was really something that a lot of these farmers anticipated. And I don't think it was something that they looked at and said, "Hey, this is what I voted for. I voted to screw my business, to teach the wokesters at AID a lesson." Right.
You're reminding me though that when the farmers took a hit from Trump's China tariffs a few years ago, his approach was then he signed some deal that he said he was subsidized. I think he subsidized the farmers. And then he bragged about that. I mean, it was the most hilarious thing in the world. Here is the nominally conservative party saying, "Hey, don't worry about the money you lost from your private income.
Here's price supports.
The government's going to give you a check."
Yeah, I think we're way past the old conservative free market model now, and deeply into something much weirder and darker and stupid.
Yeah.
I do think, you wrote a piece the other day that Trump is crazy, and I think people have used that phrase too loosely. I think Trump is showing, and I think we made this point a lot in the election last year. 2024 Trump was not 2016 Trump, and he certainly wasn't even 2020 Trump. I think this guy is increasingly he's letting Elon play that role, because I don't think he has the juice anymore to go out and cause the consistent level of distraction that he once did. He's still pretty good at it. He's still pretty good at it. It's not over, but is Trump's mental state in your mind? Where do you see his mental state? I'm curious about that.
So we've had debates at the Bulwark about this. The extent to which Trump is different now from what he was then, and in what ways, and especially about whether he's just lying and knows better than all the stuff he says, or whether he sincerely believes it. I think he sincerely believes it because his behavior shows that. His idiotic notions about tariffs. You don't do some of the stuff he's doing without actually. I mean, the Gaza thing. I thought, Rick, that was going to be a 24-hour proposition. He's going to float this. It'll go away because obviously it's nuts. But when he sticks to it and he starts articulating stuff around it, when he has the King of Jordan coming in and he's trying to pitch that to him, that's going. The joke's kind of over.
Yeah. But I think you're right. I mean, I think people who say, "Oh, it's just Trump being Trump. It's Trump trolling you. It's Trump owning the libs." I don't think that's the case with a lot of this stuff. I think he really does believe in this backwards nature economic idea, the McKinley era thing, as you pointed out, was very, very wisely. I don't think there's anybody to say no to him at a certain level. You think Pete Hegseth is going to go, "No, sir, sorry, I'm not making up a plan. I'm not sending you a plan to send American troops to Gaza to level the place"? I think he'll do it. I mean, I think he'll have a very enabling group of people around him. And I know how crazy Susie Wiles is going right now, because she has no control over anything. Trump is running this on out of his cell phone, his insecure cell phone, everybody, just so you know. But his mental state is something I think that as critics of Trump, we have to be alert to, not to get caught up in the crazy like a fox illusion.
Right. But I think you've put your finger on what has changed. To me, what's changed is there's a certain kind of serenity that's come over Trump, because he was surprised by the victory in 2016. It was very close. He wasn't sure what he was doing. He comes in, he's got a Republican Party that wasn't geared to him until a year before that. So now the whole party is built around him. He's gotten rid of all the people who did it. So he's got more yes people, fewer no people. And he has this serene confidence that America has given him this massive mandate. He's won all the swing states. He's won the popular vote. So what's dangerous is not just that he's deluded, but he thinks he's got vindication for that. So all things that he didn't do in his first term because he felt there were other voices or people holding him back, a Mattis or a Kelly
Tillerson.
Or, even Lindsey Graham could argue with him back then. And now it's Trump's doing what he feels he wants to do. And that absence of any barriers or right immediately around him then is coupled with the absence of any barriers in Congress, no matter who he nominates for a job, well, with the exception of Matt Gaetz, but everybody else is going through. So he's got all these signals that nobody's going to stand in his way. And it's just Donald Trump's mad king mind that's going to rule all his decisions.
Mm-hmm. That's so smart. I think that, I think especially if he's already sort of mentally unstable, all those data points that kind of mind would assemble, that he's protected, that no one will oppose him, that no one will stand up to him. I think it adds up to somebody who is, when his impulses take over, we're in a lot of trouble, because like the Gaza situation, I've been waiting to see Lindsey Graham actually articulate a defense of Gaza, because the Lindsey Graham I knew would have said, Donald, that's the craziest fucking thing I ever heard in my life. Why would you want to do that? That's insane, Donald. I mean, I cannot conceive of like I keep praying for some rational person in the mix, but I mean, and people who were like, "Oh, John Thune's a centrist moderate," I'm like, get out of here. He's going to do what he wants. And all the people that we hypothetically expected who would be opposition to him, McConnell, and McConnell's credit where it's due. McConnell has stood up on a couple of things. Collins, Murkowski, Langford, a few of these people that were like more serious people or considered more serious people. What is it you think is driving their terror? Is it just the stupid primary question? Or is it Elon, or is it the harassment or the threats? What do you think is driving that rolling capitulation from these people?
Yeah, tough. I mean, there are individual cases like Cassidy in Louisiana, where I would say he is worried about a primary, so he knuckles over on Kennedy. But I think in general, I would say, so Republicans used to talk about there being these pathological cultures, and they generally meant Black America. They meant
almost
like
always
Black.
That's what they meant.
Right. But what we have is a pathological culture in the Republican Party. It is a neighborhood where nobody, it is run by a crime boss sits atop the party. He's literally done things like put his henchmen, his personal lawyers in charge of the Justice Department. Anyone who opposed him has been driven out of the neighborhood. The people who were upstanding members of the community have retired. They didn't want to be part of this party. So he's left with this culture of either accomplices or weaklings. I mean, anyone who is still there has accepted a lot of this stuff. And so I just think there is a culture of we're not going to resist. They find reasons, especially at the beginning of the administration, when they just say, you know what, let's give it a shot. Let's see how Tulsi Gabbard does as the director of national intelligence. I mean, personally, I think what's going to happen is Europeans are just not going to share intelligence with us.
Five Eyes is dead. Five Eyes is over. It's done. Folks, Five Eyes is the intelligence sharing agreement between the U.S. and four of our closest allies. And it has been a longstanding cooperative agreement. The U.S., Australia, New Zealand, Canada, the UK. And Five Eyes, every single one of those nations behind in back channels, I promise you, was telling intelligence people like, please, for the love of God, no, not her. But now, crown jewels, baby. Crown jewels. But so, Will, I want to ask you one more broad question, then we'll wrap it up for the day because I'm up on time. So when you're looking at this early, noisy, chaotic wood chipper period, they talked a lot about in the Washington Post article that came out today on Monday, the 17th, about the 3 phases of the Doge operation. This chaotic moment in the front end has been very newsy. The crazy young incels, Elon running around like having sleepovers at the old executive office building, all this lunatic stuff. It's going to settle into the more boring administrative bureaucratic process of trying to fire everybody that Trump doesn't like. Where do you think America will see this Doge moment around the midterms of next year? Will they, do you think there's going to be some sort of economic uplift that they'll write it off? Or do you think people are going to have economic concerns still, and they're going to say, these guys wasted the first 6 months by, having 19-year-olds sleeping on the floor in the IRS trying to get our tax data?
So what I think, Rick, is that at the Bulwark, we kind of expected there to be more of public opposition to Trump at this point. It isn't materializing to the extent we thought, and I think one reason is people voted for change. They were unhappy with the way things were. And Trump is manifestly changing things, like erring on the side of a lot of activity. So people are going to be happy with that, the appearance of change generally for a while. The problem is when you do surgery with a wood chipper, you are going to destroy things that are going to matter. And by certainly within the next 2 years, by the midterms, the damage is going to coincide with, if not cause, something like a bird flu epidemic, like a series of more plane crashes. And it's going to be, I don't think Trump's failure to act on prices or to do enough on prices is going to hurt enough, but I do think it's going to be possible to link his acts in this period to later stuff. Remember the Biden mantra of deliverism? So deliverism was, we're going to do good stuff for people and that's going to result in re-election. So deliverism manifestly failed. But what if the negative version of deliverism works, right? What if doing things that lead to just concrete harm, like like a bird flu epidemic, or like plane crashes, or I'm trying to think of like there's going to be hurricanes, right? You say the heck with FEMA.
Let's get rid of FEMA.
Right, we get rid of FEMA and the hurricane. I find it hard to believe, Rick, that on a sheer probability basis, by the time we get to the midterms, a couple of things, big things, won't have happened. Bad things that are easily traced to Trump's actions in these first weeks of his administration. And I think even though deliverism didn't work for Biden, the kind of anti-deliverism, the destructivism of Trump, that'll hurt.
Well, Will, I want to thank you so much for joining us on the enemies list today. Folks, read Will at the Bulwark. Will, where can folks find you on social media?
I'm just at Saletan on X, Twitter, Blue Sky, all that stuff. So you can find me there.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Will. I look forward to talking to you again. Will Saletan, everybody. We'll talk to you again next time on the enemies list. Hey, folks, I'm recording this on Monday morning. And over the weekend, I think World War III might have started. I don't think we know it yet, but I think World War III might have started. And the four people responsible for starting World War III, when history goes back and winds this clock back, are Donald Trump, Marco Rubio, Pete Hegseth, and J.D. Vance. When the Munich Security Conference is convened every year around this time, the NATO allies, for forever, since I was around at the DoD, have met at Munich, and they've talked about the commonality of interest between the NATO members. What you saw this week, that J.D. Vance and Pete Hegseth led an attack on NATO. They went to Europe and took a shit on a 75-year alliance that has maintained stability and peace in Europe and helped maintain stability and peace around the world. There's a reason we never had a nuclear war, and that's NATO. There's a reason the Russians, back when they had vastly, vastly superior numbers, never rolled tanks through the Fulda Gap into Germany. That's NATO. There's a reason that on 9/11, when America was attacked and over 3,000 lives were taken by Islamic terrorists, there was one group of allies that stepped up to America's aid immediately, and that was NATO. J.D. Vance's speech was so shallow, so immature, so superficial, so shitty, so juvenile. It really indicates to me that the infection of the MAGA own the libs sarcasm has now reached a level where J.D. Vance, who knows better, went to the NATO security meeting and took a dump on our allies. Pete Hegseth goes in, and by the way, folks, sloppy drunk Pete Hegseth went to the NATO security conference, and he led the so-called negotiations with Russia by saying, nope, Ukraine can't be in NATO, and Putin gets to keep Ukraine, or at least chunks of it. These are not smart people. Pete Hegseth is not a smart person. In fact, he's a shallow Fox News host with a drinking problem for a reason. Because Pete Hegseth is not a genius. Pete Hegseth is not even smart. He is not educated. He is not sophisticated. He does not understand history or politics or the military. Just because he served in an infantry unit does not mean that he understands the global picture. And it was quite clear that he didn't, because he sold out Ukraine before they even sat down at the negotiating table. The idea that Marco Rubio and this congressional delegation that went to Zelensky hands him a piece of paper that says, you have to pay us back for all the aid we've given you by giving us 50% of Ukraine's mineral rights forever, was a level of insanity, a level of absurdity that any serious person should have said, wait, whoa, this isn't how we handle things in America. This isn't how we retain and maintain diplomatic and political and military relationships with other countries. The incompetence, the mania, the absurdity all stems from Donald Trump. Donald Trump loves Vladimir Putin like a fat kid loves cake. Donald Trump loves Vladimir Putin so much that if Putin farted in his face, he'd say it smelled like sunshine and honeysuckle. Donald Trump is on the wrong side of history. He is realigning America with the bad guys. He looks at Putin and Xi and Kim Jong-un as a role model for how he wants America to be in the world. Acquisitive. He wants to go out and invade Greenland and Panama and Gaza and maybe Canada. These things are no longer like funny little tropes or jokes. It's not Trump owning the libs. He wants to chunk the world up into spheres of influence. He wants China to have the Pacific. He wants Russia to have Europe. And he wants America to have the Americas. Now, this was a model that existed 100, 120 years ago. And that model failed. Why? Because technology and communications and transportation and the globalization of industry and supply chains unlocked, yes, some chaos and disruption, but unlocked enormous global prosperity. They want to wind that back. Trump wants to wind that back. He wants these spheres of influence where a dictator runs most of Europe, and a dictator runs most of Asia, and a dictator with the family name of Trump runs America. The four men I named here, Donald Trump, Marco Rubio, Pete Hegseth, and J.D. Vance, embarrassed this country at a level that is almost inconceivable. My European friends are losing their shit. And they're not losing their shit in the, oh no, what do we do way? They're losing their shit in the, well, America's fucked us. We've been abandoned. Our alliance obviously didn't mean what we thought it meant. So what we're going to do is build a European defense force. What we're going to do is arm Europe in such a way that Putin doesn't ever feel like he can walk in our door. Because Zelensky was right. When Zelensky this weekend said, if you do this, Vladimir Putin will be in the Balkans. Vladimir Putin will be in the Baltic. Vladimir Putin will be in Poland. Vladimir Putin will be in Germany. Do not believe for a moment that what Trump and Vance and Rubio and Hegseth did this weekend didn't leave the Kremlin popping champagne and doing a victory dance, because those guys heard the clear sound of American retreat from the world. They heard the clear sound of danger to their ambitions in Europe being removed. This is not about how much Europe spends on defense. It's really not. This is about how much America has squandered its reputation, its honor, its political capital in a astounding way, because Donald Trump wants his ego stroked by Vladimir Putin, who calls him and says, "Oh, you're the strongest, tallest, most handsome man in the room, Donald. No one's better than you." Trump falls for it. Now, look, the Tucker Carlson wing of the party, which I'm now including Vance, and frankly, Hegseth is not as sophisticated as Vance, but these guys have this sort of shallow, well, Russia doesn't like those gays either, so we'll be aligned with them. Believe me, the white nat Christian populism thing that Alexander Dugin, look him up, is promoting in Russia, and it basically has become the dominant political culture of Russia. They are very envious of it. But these four men, when the history of this time is written, with the violence and the chaos and the war that comes to Europe next, I want you to remember those four names: Trump, Rubio, Hegseth, Vance. Those men are the architects of a global conflict that we will not soon emerge from. This is a time of enormous danger, and that is why those four people will forever be on the enemies list.